She took money out of her own pocket to pay for the elderly man's gas, not knowing that he was actually a millionaire. A few hours later, she was fired by her manager. She depended on that job to pay for her young daughter's education and her sick mother's medicine. The next day, she receives a phone call that will surprise you. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going! Sarah Matthews pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the empty parking lot of Walker's gas station. The early morning fog hung low, shrouding the towering price sign in a ghostly haze. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete, matching the rhythm of her racing thoughts about the stack of unpaid bills waiting at home. At 42, this wasn't where she had imagined herself. The name tag pinned to her blue uniform shirt felt like a reminder of dreams deferred, but she held her head high as she approached the glass door of the convenience store. The smell of fresh coffee brewing inside offered a small comfort as she unlocked the entrance, beginning another day of what had become her life for the past 3 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Matthews," Tommy, the night shift worker, greeted her with tired eyes. "The register's counted and ready, just need you to sign off." Sarah nodded, settling into the familiar routine. As she checked the numbers, her mind wandered to her daughter Emma's upcoming school expenses and her mother's increasing medical bills. The weight of being the sole provider for 3 generations pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she refused to let it break her spirit. The first customers began trickling in as the sun barely peeked over the horizon. Sarah greeted each one with a genuine smile, remembering their usual purchases and asking about their families. It wasn't just customer service to her. These small connections made the long hours more bearable. "The usual, Mr. Rodriguez?" she called out as a regular customer entered, already reaching for his preferred brand of cigarettes. "You know me too well, Sarah," he chuckled, placing exact change on the counter. "How's that bright girl of yours doing in school?" "Top of Faye." "Her class," Sarah beamed, momentarily forgetting her worries. "She's already talking about college applications, though that's still a few years away." The morning rush brought its typical parade of commuters, each in their own hurry to reach their destinations. Sarah moved efficiently between the register and the coffee station, restocking cups and wiping spills while maintaining her cheerful demeanor. Her co-worker, Mike Stevens, arrived for his shift, barely acknowledging her presence as he disappeared into the back room. The rush slowly died down as the clock approached mid-morning. Sarah used the quiet moment to restock the shelves, her mind drifting to the envelope hidden in her locker containing this month's electricity bill. The red final notice stamp seemed to mock her every time she thought about it. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. An elderly gentleman in a well-worn tweed jacket shuffled in, his silver hair neatly combed despite the wind outside. There was something dignified about his bearing, though his hands trembled slightly as he approached the counter. "Pump number 4, please," he said, his voice carrying the refined tone of someone who had once commanded boardrooms. "Fill it up." Sarah watched through the window as he struggled slightly with the pump, but managed to begin fueling his modest sedan. There was something about his demeanor that touched her heart, a familiar pride mixed with vulnerability that reminded her of her own father. When he returned inside, his face had lost some of its color. "I seem to have left my wallet at home," he announced, his voice barely above a whisper. This has never happened before." His hands shook more pronouncedly now, and Sarah could see the shame creeping into his expression. Mike emerged from the back room, his face hardening at the scene before him. "Sir, we need payment for the fuel," he stated firmly. "Should I call the police?" The elderly man's face crumpled, and Sarah felt something inside her chest tighten. Without hesitation, she pulled out her own worn wallet. "I'll take care of it, sir," she said softly, swiping her debit card through the reader. "Please don't worry about it." The old man's eyes welled with tears. "I can't accept. I'll come back with the money. I promise." "It's already done," Sarah smiled, handing him the receipt. "We all forget things sometimes. Please have a safe drive home." As the gentleman left, His shoulders straightened with restored dignity. Mike's voice cut through the air like ice. "You know that's against company policy, Sarah. We can't just give away gas." "I paid for it myself," she responded calmly, though her heart raced at the thought of the money she'd just spent. Money that should have gone toward Emma's school supplies. Mike's expression darkened. "Rules are rules. I'm going to have to report this." Sarah watched him stalk toward the manager's office, her stomach knotting with anxiety. But as she caught a final glimpse of the elderly gentleman driving away, she knew she wouldn't have done anything differently. Some things, she believed, were worth more than rules. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gas station's forecourt as Sarah continued her shift, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety growing in her stomach. She could see Linda Morrison, the station manager, watching her through the office window, her face set in its characteristic stern expression. The phone call Sarah dreaded seemed inevitable now. "Sarah, could you come to my office?" Linda's voice crackled over the intercom, confirming her fears. Making her way to the small office, Sarah passed Mike, who avoided her gaze but couldn't hide his slight smirk. The walk felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of impending consequences. The office door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in her ears. "Sit down," Linda gestured to the metal chair across from her desk. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed incessantly, adding to Sarah's growing headache. "Mike tells me you gave away free gas today." "I paid for it myself," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The gentleman forgot his wallet and I—" "That's not the point," Linda interrupted, shuffling through some papers on her desk. "We have protocols in place for a reason. What you did sets a dangerous precedent. What's to stop others from claiming they forgot their wallets?" Sarah sat straighter in her chair. It was a judgment call. He was clearly distressed, and I took responsibility for the payment. No company money was involved. Linda's expression hardened. "You've been here long enough to know better. This isn't the first time you've bent the rules, Sarah. Last month, you let that young mother use the bathroom without buying anything. Before that, you gave away free coffee to a truck driver who was short on cash. Those were exceptional circumstances. They're all exceptional circumstances to you." Linda cut her off again. "But we're running a business here, not a charity. I'm sorry, but I have to let you go." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Please, Linda, I need this job. My daughter, my mother. You should have thought about them before breaking company policy. Clean out your locker and turn in your name tag. We'll mail your final check." Sarah's mind raced through calculations. Mortgage payments, utility bills, her mother's medications, Emma's school expenses. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as she stood, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The walk to her locker felt surreal. She could feel the eyes of her co-workers on her as she gathered her few belongings. A spare sweater, some family photos taped to the metal door, the emergency granola bars she kept for long shifts. Mike watched from behind the counter, his expression a mixture of triumph and unease. Outside, the afternoon had turned grey, matching her mood. Sarah sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, fighting back tears. The electricity bill in her purse seemed to burn through the fabric, a constant reminder of the precarious position she now found herself in. The drive home was a blur of trying to figure out how to tell her family. Emma would be devastated. She'd been saving her allowance to help with the bills, though Sarah always snuck the money back into her daughter's piggy bank. And her mother. Sarah couldn't bear to think of the worry this would cause her. As she pulled into their modest driveway, Emma burst out of the front door, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. "Mom, you're home early." Her daughter's smile faltered as she caught sight of Sarah's expression. "What's wrong?" "Let's go inside, sweetheart," Sarah managed, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "I need to talk to you and Grandma." The living room was warm and familiar, filled with memories of better days. Her mother sat in her favorite armchair, working on a crossword puzzle, but her eyes were sharp as they met Sarah's. "You're home early," her mother echoed Emma's words, but her tone carried understanding rather than surprise. Sarah sank onto the worn couch, patting the space beside her for Emma. "Something happened at work today," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. "I helped someone who needed it, and, well, sometimes doing the right thing has consequences we don't expect." Emma's hand slipped into hers as she explained, squeezing tightly. Her mother's face remained calm, though Sarah could see the worry lines deepening around her eyes. "We'll figure something out," her mother said firmly when Sarah finished. "We always do." Emma nodded vigorously. "I can help. I can do more chores, maybe get a paper route." Sarah pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "You focus on school, sweetheart. That's your job right now." As the evening settled around them, Sarah tried to maintain a brave face for her family. She prepared dinner, as usual, helped Emma with her homework, and listened to her mother's stories about the neighborhood gossip. But after Emma went to bed, she sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and job listings, feeling more alone than ever. The phone's sudden ring startled her out of her desperate planning. The number was unfamiliar, and she almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Is this Sarah Matthews?" a male voice asked, warm but businesslike. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Alexander Walker. I wonder if you might join me for coffee tomorrow morning. There's something important I'd like to discuss with you." The Golden Bean Cafe sat nestled between a bookstore and a boutique in downtown Cedar Grove, its warm interior a stark contrast to the chilly morning outside. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, her hands clutching her worn leather purse as she scanned the nearly empty establishment. She had chosen her most professional outfit, a navy blazer she kept for special occasions and her best pair of slacks. Her mind had raced all night with possibilities. The name Walker had seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. Was this a job opportunity? A scam? She'd searched online but found little information that seemed relevant. Still, desperation had driven her here, hope mixing with anxiety in her stomach. "Mrs. Matthews?" A deep voice startled her from her thoughts. She turned to find a tall man in his late 40s standing beside her table, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his eyes, a striking shade of green, held a warmth that somehow put her at ease. "Mr. Walker." She stood, extending her hand. His handshake was firm but not overwhelming, and his smile seemed genuine. "Please call me Alex," he said, gesturing for her to sit as he took the chair opposite. "I took the liberty of ordering some coffee and pastries. I hope you don't mind." As if on cue, a waitress appeared with a tray laden with coffee and an assortment of breakfast pastries. Sarah's stomach growled traitorously. She'd been too nervous to eat that morning. "You must be wondering why I asked you here," Alex began, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Yesterday, you helped an elderly gentleman at Walker's gas station. He had forgotten his wallet." Sarah's back stiffened. "Yes, I did. And I was fired for it." "I know." Alex's expression softened. "That gentleman was my grandfather, Edward Walker, and I own the chain of gas stations where you worked." The realization hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. Walker's gas stations, of course. How had she not made the connection? She felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "Your grandfather, is he all right?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself, genuine concern overshadowing her own situation for a moment. Alex's eyes crinkled at the corners. "He's fine, thanks to your kindness. He's been having some memory issues lately, but he's too proud to admit it. Yesterday was particularly difficult for him." Sarah relaxed slightly, relieved to hear the elderly gentleman was okay. "I'm glad I could help." "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss." Alex leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "What you did yesterday, it wasn't just about paying for gas. You restored my grandfather's dignity. You showed compassion when others showed judgment." "Anyone would have done the same," Sarah protested, though she knew it wasn't true. Mike's reaction had proved that. "But they didn't. You did." Alex paused, studying her face. "Tell me, Mrs. Matthews, how long have you worked in customer service?" "Please call me Sarah," she replied automatically. And, well, most of my adult life. The gas station was just the latest in a string of jobs. I've worked in retail, restaurants, various service positions. And your educational background? Sarah hesitated. Some college, business administration. I had to drop out when my daughter was born. Alex nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Sarah, what happened yesterday? It wasn't entirely coincidental. We've been conducting a series of integrity tests across our locations, different scenarios designed to evaluate how our employees handle ethical dilemmas. You mean it was a test? Sarah felt her throat tighten. Your grandfather? No, Alex quickly clarified. My grandfather's situation was entirely genuine, but it showed us something important about character, something that all our planned tests failed to reveal. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I've spent the morning reviewing your employee file, perfect attendance, consistent positive customer feedback, multiple commendations for going above and beyond, but also several notations for policy violations, all of which seem to involve helping people in need. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I know I sometimes bend the rules, but You have integrity, Alex interrupted. Real integrity, not just compliance. Do you know how rare that is in today's business world? Before Sarah could respond, Alex placed a business card on the table between them. I'm here to offer you a job, Sarah, not as a cashier, but as the new manager of the Cedar Grove location. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Manager? But Linda. Morrison has been terminated, Alex stated firmly. Her handling of your situation yesterday was the final straw in a long list of poor management decisions. We need someone who understands that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. Sarah's mind raced. Manager? The salary would solve her financial problems, but I've never managed a store before. I don't have the experience. You have exactly the experience we need. You understand our customers. You know our operations from the ground up. And most importantly, you have something that can't be taught. Genuine compassion combined with sound judgment. The offer hung in the air between them, full of possibility and terror. Sarah thought of Emma, of her mother, of all the bills piling up at home, but she also thought of Mike, of facing her former co-workers as their boss, of the enormous responsibility. I need time to think about it, she managed. Alex smiled, sliding the business card closer to her. Go, of course, take 24 hours. Call me when you've decided. He stood, straightening his jacket. Oh, and Sarah, the job comes with full benefits, including educational assistance for dependents. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, thinking of Emma's college dreams. As Alex walked away, she stared at the business card, its embossed letters seeming to shimmer in the morning light. Her door had opened, one that could change everything. The question was, did she have the courage to walk through it? The walk home from the Golden Bean felt surreal, each step accompanied by a whirlwind of thoughts. Sarah clutched Alex Walker's business card in her pocket like a talisman, her mind replaying every detail of their conversation. The morning sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows that seemed to dance around her feet. When she reached her modest house, she found Emma sitting on the porch steps, textbook open on her lap. Her daughter's face lit up at the sight of her mother, then quickly shifted to concern. How did it go? Emma asked, closing her book. Was it about a job? Sarah sat down beside her daughter, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. It was interesting. Remember the gentleman I helped yesterday? As Sarah recounted the meeting, Emma's eyes grew wider. Manager, Mom, that's amazing. You have to take it. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Sarah sighed, running her fingers through her hair. I'd be in charge of people who used to be my co-workers. Some of them might not be happy about that. Like Mr. Stevens? Emma's nose wrinkled at the mention of Mike, whom she'd met during visits to the station. He's always been mean anyway. Inside, they found Sarah's mother in the kitchen, preparing lunch. The smell of her famous vegetable soup filled the air. bringing comfort even in uncertainty. As Sarah shared the morning's events again, her mother's experienced eyes studied her face. "You're scared," her mother stated simply, stirring the soup. "That's good. It means you understand the responsibility. But being scared isn't a reason not to do something, Sarah. It's a reason to do it carefully." The afternoon passed in a blur of discussion and deliberation. Sarah made lists of pros and cons, calculated the difference in salary against their expenses, and imagined every possible scenario. By evening, she found herself sitting in the backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The sound of the screen, Dr. Opening announced Emma's presence before her daughter settled into the chair beside her. "I found this in my room," Emma said, holding out a worn photograph. "Remember when you took it?" Sarah smiled at the image. Emma, at age 6, sitting proudly behind a lemonade stand she'd built with her grandfather. The sign, written in wobbly letters, read "Lemonade, 25 cents or whatever you can pay." "You gave away more cups than you sold that day," Sarah remembered, touching the photograph gently. "But remember what Grandpa said. He said I was investing in kindness, and that always pays off eventually." Emma's voice carried a wisdom beyond her years. "Maybe this is your kindness paying off, Mom." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Her father had always believed in her, always pushed her to reach higher. What would he say about this opportunity? The decision crystallized in that moment, clear as the evening star appearing in the darkening sky. Sarah pulled out her phone and the business card, dialing before doubt could creep back in. "Mr. Walker, it's Sarah Matthews. About the position." "I'd like to accept." Alex's voice carried a smile. "Excellent decision, Sarah. Can you start Monday?" The weekend passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah invested in 2 new business outfits, reviewed company policies online, and spent hours practicing management scenarios in front of her mirror. Her mother helped her prepare a professional wardrobe from their limited resources, while Emma offered enthusiastic encouragement and fashion advice. Monday morning arrived with a mix of fog and sunshine, much like the day that had changed everything. Sarah stood in front of Walker's gas station, keys in hand, 30 minutes before opening. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, but she stood straight, drawing strength from her family's faith in her. Mike's car was already in the parking lot. He always arrived early for his shift. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing this first interaction would set the tone for everything that followed. As she unlocked the door, she heard footsteps behind her. "I suppose congratulations are in order." Mike's voice carried a bitter edge. "Though some of us work for years hoping for a promotion, while others get lucky." Sarah turned to face him, maintaining her composure. "I understand this is a big change, Mike. I hope we can work together to make this location even better." "Work together?" he scoffed. "You really think you can just walk in here and be the boss? That people will respect you?" Before Sarah could respond, another voice cut through the morning air. "Is there a problem here?" Both Sarah and Mike turned to find Alex Walker standing nearby, his presence unexpected and commanding. Mike's face paled slightly. "No, sir," he muttered, quickly disappearing inside the store. Alex approached Sarah, his expression concerned. "I thought you might appreciate some support on your first day. Leadership transitions can be challenging." Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and determination. "Thank you, but I need to handle this on my own. If I'm going to earn their respect, it has to be through my own actions." A smile tugged at the corner of Alex's mouth. "And that's exactly why you're the right person for this job." He gestured toward the store. "Shall we begin?" Sarah's first week as manager brought challenges she hadn't anticipated. While some employees, like young Tommy from the night shift, embraced her leadership with enthusiasm, others maintained a careful distance. The whispers in the break room would stop when she entered, and certain tasks that should have been routine suddenly became complicated. One morning, she arrived to find the daily inventory sheets incomplete, a task that Mike was responsible for. When confronted, he claimed the computer system had mysteriously crashed. Sarah spent 3 hours reconstructing the data herself, all while maintaining the cheerful demeanor, her customers had come to expect. "You're handling this well," Alex commented during one of his surprise visits. He had taken to dropping by, regularly, ostensibly to check on her progress. Today he found her reorganizing the stockroom, her blazer exchanged for the standard uniform shirt, sleeves rolled up as she worked. "Am I?" Sarah brushed a strand of hair from her face, trying to ignore how her pulse quickened at his presence. "Because some days it feels like I'm failing spectacularly." Alex leaned against a shelf, his usual corporate polish slightly softened by the fluorescent stockroom lighting. "You know what I see? Higher customer satisfaction ratings, better inventory management, and something I haven't seen in years, genuine team spirit, at least among those willing to embrace change." Sarah thought of Tommy, who had started organizing staff coffee breaks, and Maria from the afternoon shift, who had proposed a new system for tracking regular customers' preferences. "Some of them are really stepping up." "Because you're leading by example," Alex said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her look away. "You're not afraid to do the work yourself." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the hum of the refrigeration units and distant customer voices. Sarah became acutely aware of how close they were standing in the narrow stockroom aisle. "I should tell you," Alex finally spoke, his voice softer than usual. "The regional managers are impressed. They've asked me to consider implementing your customer service initiatives across other locations." Pride bloomed in Sarah's chest, but before she could respond, the stockroom door burst open. Mike stood there, his expression darkening at the sight of them together. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, not sounding sorry at all, "but there's a situation up front that requires management attention." His emphasis on the word management carried clear disdain. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I'll be right there." She turned to Alex, professionalism masking her flustered state. "Thank you for checking in, Mr. Walker." "Alex," he corrected, gently, and she could feel his eyes following her as she left the stockroom. The situation turned out to be a simple pricing dispute that any cashier could have handled. As Sarah resolved it with her usual grace, she noticed Mike watching her, his expression unreadable. Later, she overheard him on his phone in the parking lot. "No, trust me, she won't last long. The boss might be sweet on her now, but wait until he sees what I've found." The words sent a chill down her spine, but she pushed her concerns aside. There was too much work to be done to worry about Mike's schemes. She focused instead on her latest project, a community outreach program she'd been developing, inspired by her own experiences with financial hardship. That evening, as she reviewed the day's reports in her small office, a knock at the door surprised her. It was Edward Walker, Alex's grandfather, looking much more composed than the last time she'd seen him. "Miss Matthews," he smiled warmly. "Or should I say, Manager Matthews. I hoped I might find you here." "Mr. Walker, please come in." Sarah hastily cleared some papers from the visitor's chair. "Can I get you anything?" "Just a moment of your time." He settled into the chair with dignified ease. "I wanted to properly thank you for your kindness that day, and to tell you how pleased I am with what you're doing here." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just trying my best, sir." "Please, call me Edward." His eyes, the same striking green as his grandson's, twinkled. "You know, I built this company from a single station much like this one. Back then, business was about more than just profits. It was about community, something I fear we've lost sight of over the years." He leaned forward slightly. "But watching you these past weeks, seeing how you treat people, it reminds me of those early days. My grandson sees it too, you know." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Alex. "He's been very supportive. More than supportive, I'd say." Edward's smile turned knowing. "I haven't seen him visit a single location this frequently since he took over as CEO, and I've never seen him smile quite so much in business meetings." Before Sarah could process this revelation, her office phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Emma's school. Her daughter never called during class hours unless it was serious. "Excuse me, I need to take this," she apologized to Edward, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the phone. "Mom." Emma's voice was thick with tears. "Something happened at school. Can you come get me?" Sarah's world narrowed to her daughter's distress, all thoughts of Alex Walker and company politics momentarily forgotten. "I'll be right there, sweetheart, hold on." As she gathered her things, Edward Walker watched her with understanding. "Family first," he said simply. "Always family first." Sarah nodded gratefully, already dialing Tommy to cover the rest of her shift. Whatever was happening with Emma, whatever Mike was planning, whatever complicated feelings were developing between her and Alex, it would all have to wait. Right now, her daughter needed her, and that was all that mattered. The high school. Parking lot was nearly empty when Sarah arrived, her heart still racing from Emma's call. She found her daughter sitting outside the guidance counselor's office, her usual confident posture replaced by defeated, slumping shoulders. "Emma, honey, what happened?" Sarah rushed to her side, noticing the red rings around her daughter's eyes. "They're saying horrible things, Mom," Emma's voice quivered. "About you, about how you got the manager job. Someone wrote stuff on my locker, and these girls in my class keep sharing messages about—" Sarah's blood ran cold. "About what, sweetheart?" "They're saying you and Mr. Walker, that the only reason you got promoted was because—" Emma couldn't finish, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. The cruelty of it struck Sarah like a physical blow. Somehow, workplace gossip had leaked into the school community, transforming and growing more malicious as it spread. She thought of Mike's phone conversation in the parking lot and felt a surge of anger. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Chen, emerged from her office. "Mrs. Matthews, thank you for coming. Would you both step inside?" The next hour was spent discussing bullying protocols and support systems, but Sarah's mind was spinning with implications. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was affecting her daughter, the one person she'd always tried to protect from life's harsh realities. On the drive home, Emma finally spoke again. "I know it's not true, Mom. What they're saying." Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Of course it's not true. Mr. Walker gave me that job because I earned it." "Then why do you look at him that way sometimes?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "What way?" "Like how Maria looks at her fiancé when he brings her lunch, like how Grandma used to look at pictures of Grandpa." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. Was she that transparent? "Emma, relationships in the workplace are complicated. Mr. Walker is my boss, nothing more. Would it be so bad if there was more?" Emma's voice had lost its tearful quality, taking on a thoughtful tone. "He seems nice, and Grandma says you deserve to be happy. Right now, what matters is you." Sarah deflected, pulling into their driveway. "We'll talk to the school administration tomorrow," and her words were cut off by the sight of Alex's car parked in front of their house. He was standing on their porch talking with Sarah's mother, who appeared to be showing him the autumn flowers she'd planted. "Speaking of complicated," Emma muttered, a hint of her usual spark returning. Sarah's mother waved as they approached. "Look who stopped by to check on you. I told him you'd gone to Emma's school, so he's been keeping me company and admiring my gardening." Alex turned to them, concern evident in his expression. "I heard you had to leave suddenly. Is everything all right?" The normalcy of the scene, Alex chatting with her mother on their porch as if he belonged there, struck Sarah as both wonderful and terrifying. She was about to respond when Emma stepped forward. "No, everything's not all right," her daughter declared. "People are spreading lies about my mum, and it's affecting everyone. They're saying she only got her job because of me," Alex finished quietly, his face darkening with understanding. Sarah's mother, reading the situation with maternal instinct, gently steered Emma toward the house. "Come help me with dinner, dear. Your mother and Mr. Walker need to talk." Once they were alone, Alex ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of distress. "I should have anticipated this. Office politics can be vicious, but I never thought it would extend to Emma." "It's not your fault," Sarah sighed, sinking onto the porch steps. After a moment's hesitation, Alex joined her. "Actually, it is. 5 frequent visits, our conversations. I've given people ammunition for gossip. I should have been more professional, more distant." "More distant?" The words hurt more than Sarah wanted to admit. Alex turned to face her, his green eyes intense in the fading daylight. "The truth is, I've been finding excuses to visit because I look forward to seeing you, to talking with you. Your perspective on business, on life, it's refreshing, different from anything I've encountered in the corporate world." "Alex," Sarah began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know this is complicated. I'm your boss. There are company policies about fraternization, and now this situation with Emma. Maybe it would be better if I stepped back, had the regional manager oversee your location instead." "Is that what you want?" "No," he answered honestly. "But what I want isn't the only consideration." Sarah thought of Emma's tears, of Mike's schemes, of her mother's knowing looks. She thought of Edward Walker's words about community and connection. Finally, she thought of her father, who had always taught her that the right path wasn't always the easy one. "I've spent my whole life being careful," she said slowly. "Making the safe choice, the responsible choice, and I don't regret that. It's made me who I am. But maybe there's a way to be responsible and still follow your heart." A dog barked in the distance, and somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. The ordinary sounds of their neighborhood continued as Sarah and Alex sat in silence, the space between them charged with possibility and uncertainty. "We need to handle this properly," Alex finally said. "For Emma's sake, for the company's sake, and for our own." "Agreed, but how?" Before Alex could answer, the porch light flickered on, and Emma's voice called from inside. "Mom, Grandma wants to know if Mr. Walker is staying for dinner. She made extra pot roast." Alex raised an eyebrow questioningly, and Sarah found herself smiling despite everything. "Would you like to stay for dinner, Mr. Walker?" "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Matthews." As they stood, their hands brushed briefly, sending a jolt of electricity through Sarah's arm. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they would face, something told her they would face them together. The question was, how would they navigate this delicate balance between professional responsibility and personal connection? The dinner with Alex had marked a turning point, though not in the way Sarah expected. Over the following weeks, they maintained a carefully professional relationship at work, but something had shifted in the atmosphere of Walker's gas station. The whispers hadn't stopped, but they'd changed tone, especially after Alex began implementing Sarah's community outreach program across all locations. One rainy Tuesday morning, Sarah arrived early to review the monthly financial reports. The numbers weren't adding up, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She'd spent enough years managing her family's tight budget to develop an instinct for financial discrepancies. "Coffee?" Tommy appeared at her office, door holding 2 steaming cups. He'd taken to bringing her coffee on his way out from the night shift, claiming it helped him wind down to talk about his shift before heading home. "You're a lifesaver," Sarah smiled, accepting the cup. "How was the night shift?" Tommy hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before closing the office door. "Actually, I saw something weird last night. Mike came in around midnight when he thought I was doing the outdoor inventory check. He was in the office for about 20 minutes going through the filing cabinets." Sarah's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Did he take anything?" "I couldn't tell. But," Tommy lowered his voice, "I've been meaning to tell you. Sometimes, when I start my shift, the daily totals don't match what's in the system. It's usually just a few dollars off, nothing major, but it's been happening more frequently." Sarah felt her professional instincts sharpen. She'd noticed small discrepancies, too, but had attributed them to normal cash handling variations. "How long has this been going on?" "Since before you became manager. I mentioned it to Linda once, but she said I was being paranoid." A pattern was forming in Sarah's mind, pieces clicking into place. She opened her computer and began pulling up historical records, going back months before her promotion. Tommy watched over her shoulder as she created a spreadsheet, tracking the small variations. "There," she pointed to the screen. "The discrepancies always happen on days when certain employee combinations are working. And look at the amounts. They're small enough to fly under the radar, but they add up." Tommy whistled softly. That's thousands of dollars. Over time, The question is, where is it going? Sarah began examining the digital records more closely, looking for any signs of tampering. As she dug deeper, she found something even more disturbing: subtle alterations in the inventory. Systems, changes that would have been invisible without careful scrutiny. A knock at the door made them both jump. Alex stood in the doorway, his usual composed expression replaced by concern. "Sarah, do you have a moment?" Tommy took the hint, gathering his empty coffee cup. "I should head home. But Sarah, be careful with this." After Tommy left, Alex closed the door and sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. "We have a problem. The regional audit team found some irregularities in our books. They've traced them back to this location." Sarah's heart raced. "I know. I just found them myself. But Alex, these discrepancies go back months before I took over. And I think..." "It's worse than that," Alex interrupted, his voice tight. "Someone sent an anonymous tip to corporate suggesting you're involved. They included documentation, receipts, bank statements, all pointing to you." The room seemed to spin. "That's impossible. I would never..." "I know." Alex's hand twitched as if he wanted to reach for hers but stopped himself. "But the board is demanding an investigation. They're sending in forensic accountants next." "Weak!" Sarah's mind raced. The documentation had to be fake, which meant someone was deliberately setting her up. Mike's late-night office visit, his cryptic phone conversation weeks ago, it all pointed to a calculated plan. "Give me until then," she said, turning her computer screen to show Alex her findings. "I think I know what's really going on here, but I need time to prove it." Alex studied the spreadsheet, his expression darkening. "This is sophisticated. Multiple people would have to be involved to pull this off." "Yes, and I have a feeling it goes higher than just this location." Sarah hesitated, then added, "Linda was too quick to dismiss Tommy's concerns about the discrepancies. What if she was part of it? And now you're in her position, threatening to expose everything." Alex ran a hand through his hair. "Sarah, if you're right, these people won't stop at framing you. They could..." "I can handle it," she interrupted firmly. "But I need access to the corporate financial database. Can you arrange that?" Alex stood, straightening his jacket. "I'll have IT set up remote access for you today. But Sarah..." He paused at the door, his expression conflicted. "Be careful. Some of these people have been with the company for years. They have connections I don't even know about." After he left, Sarah sat in her office, staring at the numbers on her screen. She thought of Emma, of her mother, of everything she'd worked so hard to build. She couldn't let someone destroy it all with false accusations. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, weird thing happened at school. Someone left an envelope in my locker. There's money inside and a note saying to tell you to back off or else. Should I be worried?" Sarah's hands trembled as she typed back, "Don't touch anything else in the envelope. I'm calling the school now." As she dialed the school's number, she noticed Mike watching her office through the store window, a satisfied smirk on his face. The game had changed. This wasn't just about her job anymore. Someone was threatening her family, and that was a line they would regret crossing. The school principal's office was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Sarah's mind. Emma sat beside her, the envelope containing the threatening note sealed in a plastic bag on the principal's desk. School security cameras had caught a glimpse of someone in a maintenance uniform leaving it in Emma's locker, but the footage was too grainy for positive identification. "We're taking this very seriously, Mrs. Matthews," Principal Rodriguez assured her. "We've already contacted the authorities and we'll be implementing additional security measures immediately." Emma reached for Sarah's hand. "Mom, what's really going on? This isn't just about those rumors anymore, is it?" Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, wondering how much to reveal. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Tommy. "Emergency at the station. Someone broke into the office. Police are here." "Mrs. Matthews?" The principal's voice seemed distant. "Would you like us to arrange for Emma to stay with the guidance counselor while you handle this situation?" Emma straightened in her chair. "No, I want to go home with Grandma. Mom needs to deal with this, and I'll be safer there." Sarah felt a surge of pride through her worry. Her daughter was showing more maturity than many adults would in this situation. "I'll call Mom to pick you up, sweetie. Principal Rodriguez, thank you for your help." The drive back to the station was a blur of racing thoughts and mounting anxiety. Police cars filled the parking lot, their lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Mike stood near the entrance, talking animatedly with two officers. "It was definitely her," Sarah heard him saying as she approached. "Matthews has been acting suspicious for weeks, staying late, accessing files she shouldn't. Now suddenly we're broken into. It can't be a coincidence." "That's an interesting theory," Sarah spoke up, making them all turn. "Especially since you're the one I caught on security footage entering the office at midnight." Mike's face paled, slightly before he recovered. "Proving my point about checking the cameras. How else would you know that unless you've been monitoring everyone's movements?" One of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, turned to Sarah. "Ms. Matthews, I'm Detective Chen. Would you mind explaining what's going on here?" Before Sarah could answer, Alex's car pulled into the lot, tires spraying water from a puddle. He strode toward them, every inch the powerful CEO despite the rain, dampening his suit. "Detective, I'm Alexander Walker, owner of this establishment. Before we continue, you should know that we've uncovered evidence of long-term financial fraud at this location. Evidence that predates Mrs. Matthews' management position." Mike's smirk faltered. "Mr. Walker, surely you can't believe—" "Furthermore," Alex continued, "we have documentation suggesting that Mrs. Matthews has been targeted for discovering this fraud. The break-in appears to be an attempt to destroy evidence she's gathered." Detective Chen's interest visibly sharpened. "Financial fraud? Why wasn't this reported earlier?" "Because we only confirmed it this morning," Sarah explained, pulling out her phone to show the detective her spreadsheets. "See these patterns? Small discrepancies, carefully hidden, going back months. But when you add them up, they create a significant sum." Detective Chen finished studying the numbers. "And you said you have documentation?" Alex nodded. "Our corporate security team is cooperating fully with your department. They're preparing all relevant records now." Mike's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. You're all just taking her word for it. She's got Walker wrapped around her finger, everyone knows it. That's the only reason she got this job in the first place." "Actually," a new voice joined the conversation, "she got the job because she showed genuine integrity when everyone else failed the test." Edward Walker emerged from his car, looking every bit as distinguished as the day Sarah had first helped him. "You see, Detective, we've been aware of financial irregularities for some time. We set up various scenarios to test employee reactions, hoping to identify both the honest workers and those who might be involved in the fraud." Mike's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Mr. Walker, sir, you can't possibly—" "When I pretended to forget my wallet that day," Edward continued, "most employees either threatened to call the police or ignored the situation entirely. Only Sarah showed both compassion and professional responsibility by handling it personally. That's why she was promoted, because she proved herself worthy of trust." Detective Chen turned to Mike, whose expression had shifted from anger to fear. "Sir, I think we need to continue this conversation at the station, and I'll need to see any security footage from the past few weeks." As the police led Mike away, Sarah felt the adrenaline that had been sustaining her begin to fade. Alex stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "We should have seen this coming," he said quietly. "The fraud, the threats, all of it. I'm sorry you and Emma were put in danger." "You couldn't have known," Sarah replied, watching as forensics teams began examining the office. "None of us could have predicted how far they'd go to cover their tracks." Edward touched her shoulder gently. "The question now is, what do you want to do? No one would blame you if you decided this was too much risk for your family." Sarah thought of Emma's courage in the principal's office, of her mother's unwavering support, of Tommy's loyalty in reporting his suspicions. She thought of all the employees who had come to trust her leadership and the community members who relied on the store's new outreach programs. "I want to fix this," she said firmly. "Not just the immediate problem, but the whole system that allowed it to happen. No more looking the other way, no more accepting small discrepancies. This store should be a place where both employees and customers know they can trust what's happening." Alex's expression softened with something that looked remarkably like pride, and perhaps something more. Then that's exactly what we'll do together. The rain had stopped, and a weak sun was breaking through the clouds. As Sarah watched the police doing their work, she felt a strange sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time since the threats began, she wasn't afraid. She had truth on her side, support from those who mattered, and a clear vision of the future she wanted to build. The question was, how many more surprises were waiting to be uncovered as they dug deeper into the company's past? The corporate office of Walker's gas stations occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown building, a world away from the fluorescent-lit convenience store where Sarah usually spent her days. She sat in a conference room with Alex, Edward, and a team of forensic accountants, surrounded by stacks of financial records and multiple computer screens displaying complex spreadsheets. The pattern extends beyond just your location, Diana. Chen, the lead accountant, explained, pointing to a series of highlighted transactions. We've found similar discrepancies in at least 6 other stations, all connected through a sophisticated network of micro-adjustments and inventory manipulations. Sarah leaned forward, studying the data, and they all trace back to the same time period. Yes, approximately 3 years ago. Diana pulled up another document, which, interestingly, coincides with the hiring of this man as regional financial coordinator. A photograph appeared on the main screen, James Morrison, Linda's husband. Sarah's breath caught as another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. That explains Linda's quick dismissal of Tommy's concerns, she murmured. She was protecting her husband's operation. Alex paced near the window, his reflection fragmented in the late afternoon sunlight. The question is, how deep does this go? Morrison had access to our entire financial system, connections throughout the company, and friends in high places, Edward added grimly. He was quite popular with certain board members. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, you won't believe who just showed up at school to apologize for the envelope incident." Before Sarah could respond, Diana gasped softly. "Mr. Walker, you need to see this. I've found something in the executive expense accounts." The room fell silent as Diana pulled up a series of transactions. Large consulting fees paid to shell companies, travel expenses that didn't match any actual business trips, charitable donations that never reached their intended recipients, all approved by a signature Sarah recognized from her employee paperwork. "That's Corporate Vice President Richardson's signature," Alex said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He's been on our board for 20 years. He's also James Morrison's uncle," Edward added quietly, something he conveniently failed to disclose when Morrison was hired. Sarah felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This wasn't just about a few $1,000s missing from her store. This was systematic corruption, reaching into the highest levels of the company. No wonder they'd been so desperate to silence her. "There's more," Diana continued, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The shell companies, they're all registered to the same address, a law firm downtown. Carlton and Associates," Alex read, his expression darkening. "They handle most of our corporate legal work." Sarah's phone buzzed again. Emma. "Linda Morrison just tried to talk to me, said she wants to make things right. Should I trust her?" "No," Sarah typed back quickly. "Don't engage. Where are you now?" "Safe in Principal Rodriguez's office." "But Mum, she seemed scared, like really scared." Sarah looked up from her phone to find Alex watching her with concern. "Emma!" Linda Morrison showed up at her school. Sarah ran a hand through her hair. "Maybe we're not the only ones feeling pressure from higher up." Edward tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the conference table. "Linda might be the weak link. If her husband's involvement is exposed, she could lose everything. She might be willing to talk." "It's too risky," Alex objected. "We can't trust—" A commotion in the outer office interrupted him. Through the glass walls, they could see Linda Morrison herself, looking disheveled and frantic, arguing with security. "Please," they heard her say, her voice muffled through the glass. "I need to speak with Sarah Matthews. It's about my husband. About everything. They're going to pin it all on him, and I can't let that happen. Not when I know who's really behind it all. Sarah stood, but Alex caught her arm. Sarah, wait. This could be another trap. She met his concerned gaze steadily. Or it could be our chance to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, remember? Their eyes held for a long moment, volumes of unspoken words passing between them. Finally, Alex nodded to security to let Linda in. Linda stumbled into the conference room, clutching a thick manila envelope. Her usually perfectly styled hair was in disarray and her mascara was smudged from tears. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, looking directly at Sarah. "I'm so sorry for everything. But you need to know, this goes so much deeper than you imagine. Richardson isn't just covering up fraud. He's been using the company to launder money for years, and my husband, he found out, tried to gather evidence, but they threatened our daughter." "Mrs. Morrison," Diana interrupted gently, "are you saying you have documentation of this?" Linda held out the envelope with trembling hands. "Everything's here. Account numbers, correspondence, proof of where the money really came from. James didn't want to be part of it, but Richardson said he'd make sure our daughter never got into medical school, that she'd never work in this state again." Sarah's maternal instincts flared. She thought of Emma, of the envelope in her locker, of how far she would go to protect her own child. Why come forward now? Because they're going to sacrifice James to save themselves. Richardson called this morning, said they needed a scapegoat, and my husband, he's going to take the fall for all of it. Linda's composure cracked. "I can't let that happen. Not when I know the truth." Alex had moved to examine the documents Linda brought, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is serious, Linda. What you're suggesting, it could bring down half the board." "I know." Linda straightened her shoulders, some of her old authority returning. "But I also know what it's like to watch someone you love being threatened. When I saw that envelope in Emma's locker, I realized we'd become the very monsters we were afraid." For Sarah felt a surge of sympathy for the woman she'd once feared. "We'll need you to make an official statement, to testify if it comes to that." "I will, but..." Linda glanced nervously at the door. "Richardson has connections everywhere. Private security, former military contractors, when he finds out I've come forward." "You'll have protection," Alex said firmly. "Both you and your family. I promise." Edward, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Perhaps it's time to bring in more than just the police. With allegations of money laundering at this scale, federal authorities should be involved." Sarah's phone buzzed one final time. "Emma." "Mom, there are men in suits watching the school. They don't look like regular security." Sarah showed the message to Alex, whose face hardened with determination. "Diana, contact the FBI immediately. Edward, call our private security team. Linda, you and your family need to come with us now. And Sarah." He paused, his professional mask slipping for just a moment. "Let's get Emma somewhere safe." As they moved into action, Sarah felt the familiar mix of fear and determination that had become her constant companion. But this time she wasn't facing it alone. Looking around the room at her unlikely allies, her former nemesis, her boss who might be becoming something more, and a team of people committed to uncovering the truth, she knew they stood a real chance of exposing the corruption that had poisoned the company from within. The question was, would they be able to gather enough evidence before Richardson and his allies realized their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down? The Walker family lake house stood nestled among towering pines, its weathered wooden exterior blending naturally with the surrounding forest. Sarah stood on the wraparound porch, watching Emma and Linda's daughter Ashley skip stones across the calm water as the sun set behind the mountains. "They seem to be getting along," Alex observed, joining her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He handed one to Sarah, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. "Shared trauma has a way of bringing people together," Sarah replied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "How are the Morrisons holding up?" "James is cooperating fully with the federal investigators. Linda's been on the phone with their lawyer all afternoon." Alex leaned against the porch railing, his usual corporate polish softened by casual clothes and the rustic setting. The FBI seems particularly interested in Richardson's international connections. Inside the house, they could hear Edward regaling their mothers with stories from the company's early days. Both Sarah's mother and Linda's had insisted on coming along when Alex suggested using his family's remote lake house as a safe house. "Strength in numbers," Sarah's mother had declared, brooking no argument. "It's strange," Sarah mused, watching the girls by the lake. "A week ago, Linda and I were enemies. Now we're all here, trying to protect each other." Life has a way of revealing who people really are when the stakes are high enough. Alex turned to face her, his expression serious. "Sarah, about us." A sharp knock at the front door cut him off. Everyone inside fell silent. Alex moved instinctively in front of Sarah, but Edward's voice called out, "It's all right. It's Detective Chen." The detective entered looking grave, followed by 2 FBI agents they'd met earlier. "We have a situation. Richardson's gone dark. His accounts are being emptied. His private jet filed a flight plan for a non-extradition country, and we have reason to believe he knows about Linda's evidence." "How?" Linda emerged from the back room, her face pale. "We were so careful." "Someone at Carlton & Associates tipped him off," one of the FBI agents explained. "We're implementing protective details for everyone involved, but we needed to warn you. Richardson's not the type to leave loose ends." Sarah felt her chest tighten as she looked toward the lake where Emma was showing Ashley how to find the flattest skipping stones. "What do we do?" "We have a safe house prepared," Detective Chen said. "Multiple locations, actually. We'll need to split you up." "No." The word came from both Sarah and Alex simultaneously. They shared a quick glance before Alex continued, "We're stronger together. This house is secure, remote, and my family's connection to it isn't widely known. Plus," Edward added, emerging from his study with a laptop, "we might have an advantage Richardson doesn't know about. Show them, Diana." The forensic accountant's face appeared on the screen via video call. "I've been backtracing Richardson's digital footprint. He's clever, but he made one crucial mistake. All his transactions, the real ones and the fraudulent ones, were routed through the same encrypted server. If we can prove the connection." "We can prove he was manipulating both sets of books," Sarah finished, understanding dawning. "But how do we get that proof?" "That's where it gets interesting," Diana smiled. "The server is physically located in the basement of Walker's corporate headquarters. Richardson probably thought it was safer there than in some offshore location, if we could access it directly." "Absolutely not," Alex cut in. "It's too dangerous. Richardson's men are probably watching the building." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "But they're watching for you, for Linda, for James. They're not watching for someone like Tommy." "The night shift worker?" Detective Chen asked. "Who has legitimate access to the building for maintenance and knows every back entrance?" Sarah nodded. "And who's been documenting discrepancies for months without anyone noticing?" Alex shook his head. "Sarah, we can't ask." "You don't have to," Tommy's voice came through the laptop speaker. "I've been listening in. I want to help. Those guys tried to frame Sarah, threatened Emma. That makes it personal." The FBI agents exchanged looks. With proper backup and coordination, it could work. A small team, late at night, when the building is mostly empty. "I'm going too," Sarah declared. "I know exactly what we're looking for, and Tommy trusts me." "Then I'm going with you," Alex said firmly. Linda stepped forward. "Me too. I know Richardson's security protocols, his habits, and I owe it to all of you." The room erupted in discussion. Logistics, security measures, contingency plans. Sarah felt Alex's hand slip into hers, warm and steady. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. Sarah watched Emma through the window, now teaching Ashley how to make friendship bracelets on the dock. She thought of all the people Richardson and his allies had threatened, all the lives they'd tried to destroy to protect their scheme. "Some things are worth fighting for," she replied, squeezing his hand. "You taught me that." As the sun disappeared, behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the lake, the unlikely group of allies began plotting their countermove. They had truth on their side, Sarah reflected, and something even stronger, the kind of loyalty that only comes from standing together against injustice. The question remained, Would it be enough to bring down a man who had spent decades building his fortress of corruption and influence? The Walker corporate headquarters looked different at night, its gleaming windows dark except for the occasional security light. Sarah adjusted her maintenance uniform, borrowed from Tommy's spare set, and checked her employee ID badge, carefully modified by the FBI's technical team to grant her access to the restricted areas. Communications check. Detective Chen's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece she wore. Everyone online. Copy that, Tommy responded from his position at the service entrance. Linda's voice followed from the security monitoring room where she sat with 2 FBI agents, watching the camera feeds. Alex's quiet, standing by came. Last, he had insisted on being their backup driver, waiting in a nondescript van in the adjacent parking structure. Sarah took a deep breath, pushing her cleaning cart toward the service elevator. The weight of the hidden laptop in the cart's bottom compartment seemed to grow heavier with each step. Everything depended on reaching that server in the basement without alerting Richardson's security team. 2 guards in the lobby, Linda reported. Regular patrol right on schedule. Sarah, you have exactly 4 minutes until they circle back. The elevator doors opened silently. Sarah pushed her cart inside, her heart pounding as she inserted the modified key card into the basement access slot. For a moment that felt like eternity, the card reader blinked red. Then mercifully it turned green. We're in, she whispered, feeling the elevator descend. The basement level was a maze of utility rooms and storage areas, dimly lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. Sarah pushed her cart forward, following the memorized path to the server room. Movement on the upper floors, Linda's voice was tense. Security supervisor just got a call. Sarah, something's wrong. They're changing their patrol pattern. Richardson's not as dark as we thought, Detective Chen cut in. Must have someone watching the building. Sarah, get what you need and get out fast. Sarah reached the server room door, another keycard check. Green light. Inside, rows of humming servers filled the climate-controlled space. Following Diana's instructions, she located the specific unit they needed. Okay, Diana, she breathed, pulling out the laptop. Talk me through this. Connect to port 47, Diana instructed through the earpiece. The encryption key should... Multiple. Guards heading to the basement, Linda interrupted urgently. They're not even pretending to do regular patrols anymore. They know someone's here. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard following Diana's rapid instructions. A progress bar crept across the screen. 15%, 27%, 42%. Sarah, you need to move now. Alex's voice was tight with concern. I can see 3 vehicles pulling up outside. Private security contractors. Almost. There, she muttered, watching the progress bar. 68%, 75%. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Sarah's heart nearly stopped as shadows appeared under the door. Multiple armed personnel entering the basement level, Linda reported, her voice shaking. Sarah, you have maybe 2 minutes before... Got it. Sarah unplugged the laptop as the progress bar hit 100%. She shoved it back into the cart's hidden compartment just as voices approached the server room. Check every room, a gruff voice ordered. Richardson wants whoever's here found. Sarah looked around frantically. The server room had only one exit, and it was about to be blocked by armed security. Her earpiece crackled with concerned voices. Alex calling her name, detective. Chen trying to coordinate a response, Linda reporting more security vehicles arriving. Then, through the chaos came Tommy's calm voice. Sarah, the maintenance tunnels. Behind the last server rack, it'll lead you to the parking structure. Sarah pushed her cart to the back of the room, finding the access panel Tommy described. It was barely big enough for a person to crawl through, designed for running cables between buildings. The door handle to the server room rattled. Sarah, please. Alex's voice was barely a whisper. Be careful. She pulled off her maintenance shirt, using it to wrap the laptop securely. The door began to open just as she pulled herself into the tunnel, sliding the access panel closed behind her. The maintenance tunnel was pitch black and claustrophobically narrow. Sarah could hear muffled voices above as she crawled forward, using her elbows to pull herself along. The laptop bundle dragged behind her, caught occasionally on the uneven surface. "They're sealing off the building," Linda reported. "But they haven't found the tunnel entrance yet. Sarah, you're almost to the parking structure. Alex is waiting at the south entrance." Sarah's arms ached. Her knees were bruised, but she kept moving. The voices above grew fainter as she made progress through the tunnel. Finally, she saw a faint light ahead, another access panel. "Alex," she whispered, "south entrance." "I'm almost there." "Ready and waiting," came his immediate response. Sarah reached the panel and pushed gently. It opened into a maintenance closet in the parking structure. She could hear the commotion from the main building, shouts and running. Feet. Clutching the wrapped laptop to her chest, she eased open the closet door. The parking structure was dark except for emergency lighting. She could see Alex's van idling nearby, its ordinary white paint job perfect camouflage among the other parked vehicles. She was halfway to the van when bright lights suddenly flooded the structure. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Stop right there, Mrs. Matthews. Hand over the laptop and no one needs to get hurt." Sarah froze, momentarily blinded by the lights. She could make out several figures approaching, their weapons raised. Behind them stood a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, Richardson himself, his face twisted with cold fury. "It's over," he called out. "I've known about your little investigation for weeks. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingency plans?" Sarah clutched the laptop tighter, her mind racing. She was exposed out in the open, with armed men approaching from one side and Richardson's smug face watching from the other. But then she heard it, the faint sound of multiple vehicles approaching, and Linda's triumphant voice in her earpiece. "FBI tactical team in position. Hold on, Sarah. Help is coming." The question was, would it arrive in time? Time seemed to slow down in the parking structure, each heartbeat stretching into eternity as Sarah stood caught in the harsh spotlights. The laptop felt heavy in her arms, weighted with the evidence that could bring down Richardson's entire operation. "I have to admit," Richardson's voice echoed off the concrete walls, "you've been more troublesome than I expected. A simple gas station manager, somehow unraveling years of careful planning." He took a step forward, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor. "But it ends here." Sarah's mind raced through her options. The FBI team was coming, but Richardson's men were already here, moving steadily closer. She could see Alex in her peripheral vision halfway out of the van's driver's seat, his face torn between concern for her and fury at Richardson. "You're wrong," Sarah called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "It doesn't end here. The evidence is already backing up to secure servers. Even if you get this laptop, you can't stop what's coming." Richardson's smile turned cold. "You're bluffing. The download couldn't have completed before my team responded. Now hand it over, and perhaps we can discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. I can be quite generous to those who cooperate." A new voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece, Diana's. "Keep him talking. The backup is still uploading through the laptop's cellular connection. We need 3 more minutes." Sarah thought of Emma, of her mother, of all the people Richardson had threatened and manipulated over the years. "Generous? Like you were with the Morrisons, threatening their daughter's future to keep them quiet?" Business requires certain persuasive techniques. Richardson gestured to his men, who took another step forward. "But enough talk. The laptop, Mrs. Matthews, now." Suddenly, the parking structure's lights flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness, except for the spotlights. Linda's voice came through the earpiece. "Security systems are compromised. All electronic doors are unlocking. FBI team entering through north and west entrances." In the confusion, Sarah heard Alex's van door slam shut, followed by the engine roaring to life. The van's headlights blazed on, temporarily blinding Richardson's men. Sarah didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the vehicle as Alex swung it around to shield her. "Stop them!" Richardson's command was nearly drowned out by the sound of multiple vehicles entering the structure, and the distinctive voice of Detective Chen through a megaphone. "FBI! Everyone freeze!" Sarah yanked open the van's side door and dove inside. Just as the first shots rang out, Richardson's security team firing at their tires. Alex accelerated, swerving around concrete pillars as bullets pinged off the van's reinforced body. "Hold on!" Alex called back to her as he took a sharp turn toward the exit. Through the windows, Sarah could see the chaos erupting behind them, FBI tactical teams converging, Richardson's men scattering, the man himself being tackled as he tried to flee. "We've got him," Detective Chen's voice confirmed through their earpieces. "All units secure the structure. Sarah, Alex, get that laptop to the safe house. And nice work with the security systems, Linda. 20 years as that man's secretary's wife taught me a few things about his protocols," Linda replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. As they merged onto the highway, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. She carefully unwrapped the laptop, checking its status. "Diana, did we get everything?" "Upload complete," Diana confirmed. "The encryption keys, the transaction records, everything. Richardson's entire network is exposed. The federal prosecutors are going to have a field day with this." Alex reached back with one hand, finding Sarah's and squeezing it tightly. "You were incredible back there. Reckless and terrifying, but incredible." Sarah laughed, the sound slightly hysterical with leftover adrenaline. "Says the man who turned his van into a getaway vehicle. Where did you learn to drive like that?" "Misspent." "Youth," he grinned, but his expression quickly turned serious. "Sarah, when I saw you standing there with those guns pointed at you, I've never been more scared in my life." "I know the feeling," she replied softly, thinking of all the moments over the past weeks when she'd feared for him, for Emma, for everyone who had become entangled in this web of corruption and courage. The safe house appeared ahead, its windows warmly lit. Sarah could see figures moving inside, Emma and Ashley watching from the living room window, their mothers standing behind them, Edward pacing near the door. "Detective Chen says Richardson's already talking," Linda's voice came through their earpieces one last time. "Trying to cut a deal. He's naming names, board members, international contacts, everyone." "Good," Alex said firmly. "It's time for a complete cleanup. The company my grandfather built deserves better than what these people turned it into." As they pulled into the driveway, Sarah felt the weight of the past weeks lifting. There would be more challenges ahead, testimony to give, systems to rebuild, trust to restore. But looking at Alex's profile in the dim light, at Emma's beaming face as she ran out to meet them, at the unlikely family they'd forged through adversity, she knew every risk had been worth it. "Ready to go inside?" Alex asked, turning off the engine. Sarah reached for his hand again. "Actually, can we just sit here for a moment? Just breathe?" He nodded, understanding what she needed. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars emerge in the clearing sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now this moment of peace was enough. The question of what came next, for the company, for their relationship, for all of them, could wait until morning. For now they had won something precious, the chance to face that future together with truth and integrity lighting their way. The days following Richardson's arrest passed in a whirlwind of federal investigations, press conferences, and corporate damage control. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, working alongside Alex to stabilize the company while cooperating with authorities to unravel years of financial manipulation. The Walker corporate boardroom, once Richardson's domain, now served as their command center. Sarah sat beside Alex at the massive oak table, surrounded by stacks of documents and laptops displaying endless spreadsheets. Edward Walker occupied his usual place at the head of the table, his presence a steady reminder of the company's original values. "The media's having a field day," Diana reported, gesturing to the muted television screens displaying various news channels. Each showed footage of Richardson being led away in handcuffs, interspersed with shots of the Walker's gas station's logo. "But public sentiment is actually working in our favor. The story of an honest employee standing up to corporate corruption, people are responding to that." "Speaking of honest employees," Alex added, sliding a folder across the table to Sarah, "the board has unanimously approved your appointment as Director of Corporate Ethics and Compliance. It's a new position, one we should have created years ago." Sarah opened the folder, her eyes widening at the outlined responsibilities and the accompanying salary. "Alex, I don't know. This is a huge step from managing one location." "You're already doing most of these duties unofficially," Edward pointed out. "Leading the internal investigation, developing new oversight protocols, implementing transparency measures. The title just makes it official." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom! You're trending on social media. A gas station hero is actually a thing." "Your daughter's right," Diana grinned, turning her laptop to show various social media posts. "People are sharing their own stories about your kindness at the station. The elderly gentleman you helped, the young mother you let use the bathroom, even that truck driver you gave free coffee to. They're all coming forward." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "I was just doing what seemed right." "Exactly," Alex said softly. "That's why we need you in this role. You understand that business success and ethical behavior aren't mutually exclusive." Knock at the boardroom door interrupted them. Tommy entered, looking surprisingly comfortable in business casual attire. After his role in exposing the corruption, Alex had promoted him to regional security coordinator. "Sorry to interrupt, but you all need to see this," he said, connecting his tablet to the main screen. "We've been analyzing Richardson's personal communications, and we found something interesting." Emails appeared on the screen, correspondence between Richardson and various board members dating back years. Sarah leaned forward, reading exchanges. That revealed a systematic effort to undermine Edward Walker's original vision for the company. "They saw your commitment to community service as a weakness," Tommy explained to Edward. "Richardson convinced them that maximizing profits required abandoning the old-fashioned values you built the company on." Edward's face hardened. "And now those same board members are claiming they knew nothing about his illegal activities." "They might not have known everything," Diana interjected, pulling up more documents, "but they willingly looked the other way. The question is, what do we do about it?" Alex stood, moving to stare out the window at the city below. "We clean house completely. Any board member who was complicit in compromising our values, whether they knew about the illegal activities or not, needs to go." "That's half the board," Sarah pointed out. "The shareholders will understand that we're serious about reform." Alex turned back to face them. "Dad, you always taught me that a company's culture flows from the top. If we're going to rebuild trust, we need leadership that actually believes in ethical business practices." Sarah watched Alex as he spoke, struck by his passion and determination. These past weeks had changed him too, reigniting the idealism that years of corporate politics had begun to dim. "I have some ideas about that," Edward said, pulling out a list of names. "People I've known over the years who share our values, including—" He smiled at Sarah, "some who started at the ground level and worked their way up, learning every aspect of the business firsthand." A commotion outside the boardroom drew their attention. Through the glass walls, they could see James Morrison being escorted by FBI agents, Linda following close behind. The couple had been in protective custody since turning state's evidence against Richardson. "They're here to give their formal statements," Tommy explained. "Linda asked if you would sit in, Sarah. Said she trusts you to ensure everything's handled fairly." Sarah nodded, gathering her notes. As she stood, Alex caught her hand. "Dinner tonight? There's something I want to discuss with you." "Actually," she smiled, "there's somewhere I need to be this evening, but you're welcome to join me." His questioning look made her smile widen. "The gas station is hosting its first community outreach event. Remember that program I proposed? We're offering free basic car maintenance workshops for single parents and elderly residents. Tommy's teaching them how to check tire pressure and oil levels." Alex's expression softened with understanding. The director of corporate ethics and compliance, getting her hands dirty with actual community service? "That's exactly why she's perfect for the job," Edward interjected. "She understands that real change happens at the ground level, one person at a time." As Sarah headed to the interview room to meet with the Morrisons, she felt a deep sense of rightness. The company was transforming, becoming what it should have been all along, a business that measured success not just in profits, but in positive impact on people's lives. The question now was, how would she balance her new corporate responsibilities with her commitment to hands-on community service? And what was the something Alex wanted to discuss over dinner? The evening air was crisp, as Sarah supervised the community workshop at her original gas station. The service bay had been transformed into a makeshift classroom, with Tommy demonstrating basic car maintenance techniques to an engaged group of community members. Emma moved among the participants, handing out instruction sheets she had helped design. Now remember, Tommy was saying, checking your tire pressure regularly can improve fuel efficiency and save you money in the long run. Sarah watched as an elderly woman carefully practiced using the tire pressure gauge, her face lighting up with accomplishment when she got the reading right. It was exactly the kind of scene she had envisioned when first proposing the community outreach program. Quite different from corporate boardrooms, isn't it? Alex's voice came from behind her. He had changed out of his business suit into more casual attire, though he still managed to look impeccably put together. But just as important, Sarah replied, noting how several participants were helping each other, forming connections that went beyond the practical lessons being taught. Maybe more so. They watched as Ashley Morrison demonstrated to a young single father how to check oil levels. The teenager had been coming to the station regularly, eager to learn and help others. Her parents' ordeal had inspired her to focus on community service alongside her medical school preparations. Your influence is spreading, Alex observed. The regional managers report that other locations are implementing similar programs. It's like watching ripples in a pond, each small act of kindness creating wider circles of impact. Sarah smiled, remembering her own first act of kindness. That had started everything, helping an elderly man who had forgotten his wallet. Sometimes the smallest gestures have the biggest consequences. Speaking of consequences, Alex seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with something in his pocket. Remember, I mentioned wanting to discuss something. Before he could continue, Emma called out, "Mom, Mr. Rodriguez wants to show everyone how he learned to change a tire. Can you come introduce him?" "Go," Alex smiled. "We can talk later." The evening progressed smoothly, with community members sharing stories and learning from each other. Sarah noticed her mother had arrived, sitting with Edward Walker and Linda Morrison. The three of them engaged in animated conversation. As the workshop wound down and participants began to leave, each armed with new knowledge and emergency contact, Sarah felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This was what business should be about. Not just transactions, but transformations. "Mrs. Matthews?" The elderly woman who had mastered the tire gauge approached her. "I just wanted to say thank you, not just for tonight, but for standing up to those corrupt people. My pension was invested in Walker's stocks, and when I heard about what you did, well, it gave me hope that there are still good people in business." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "We're trying to make things right." "You already have, dear." The woman patted her hand. "Oh, and that young man of yours, he's been watching you all evening like you hung the moon. Don't keep him waiting too long." With that, she winked and made her way to her car, leaving Sarah blushing. Looking around, she spotted Alex helping Tommy and Emma clean up the service bay, his sleeves rolled up as he wiped down tools. "Quite a change from the corporate CEO who first offered me the manager position," she mused aloud. "He's better for it," her mother said, joining her. "Just like you're better for all of this. Your father would be so proud, Sarah." Sarah hugged her mother tightly, watching as Emma demonstrated to Alex the proper way to organize the tool cabinet. Her daughter had blossomed through all of this, finding her own way to contribute and make a difference. "Sarah," Alex called out, "could you help me with something in the office?" The small office where she had once worried about bills and job security now felt like a symbol of how far they'd all come. Alex closed the door behind them, that nervous energy returning to his movements. "I've been trying to find the right moment, the right words," he began, running a hand through his hair. "But maybe simple and honest is best. It's what brought us here, after all." Sarah's heart began to race as Alex took her hands in his. "When I first met you in that cafe, I was impressed by your integrity. Working with you these past months, seeing your commitment to both people and principles, I've grown to admire you more each day." And somewhere along the way, admiration turned into something deeper. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I'm not just asking for personal reasons, though my feelings for you are profound. I'm asking because together, we can make this company what it always should have been. A force for good in people's lives. A business built on values, not just value." Sarah felt tears forming as Alex knelt down, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Sarah Matthews, will you be my partner in all things? In life, in love, in building something meaningful?" Through the office window, Sarah could see Emma watching with barely contained excitement, her mother and Edward wearing knowing smiles. Tommy gave her a thumbs up while Linda dabbed at her eyes. Looking back at Alex, Sarah saw not just the powerful CEO or the man she'd grown to love, but a partner who shared her vision of what business and life could be. Someone who understood. That true success came from lifting others up, not climbing over them. The question he'd asked demanded an answer, one that would shape not just their lives, but the future of everything they'd fought to build. What would she say? Sarah's yes echoed in the small office, followed by applause and cheers from their impromptu audience outside the window. Alex slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly trembling hands, and as he stood, she pulled him into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. The door burst open as Emma rushed in, followed by the others. "Finally!" her daughter exclaimed, throwing her arms around both of them. "I thought he was never going to ask." "You knew about this?" Sarah asked, looking at her daughter's gleaming eyes. "We all did," Edward chuckled. "Alex asked for Emma's. Blessing first, then your mother's. He's been carrying that ring around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. And trust my son to propose in a gas station office," Alex's mother, Janet, added, appearing in the doorway. She had arrived quietly during the workshop, wanting to see her son's happiness firsthand. "It's perfect, actually," Sarah smiled, looking around the small space that had witnessed so much of their journey. This is where everything started to change. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of both personal and professional developments. The federal investigation into Richardson's activities had expanded, revealing corruption in other major corporations. Walker's gas stations, under its new ethical leadership, was being hailed as a model for corporate reform. Sarah's community outreach program had gone viral, with news stations picking up stories of lives changed through the initiative. Other companies were reaching out, wanting to learn how to implement similar programs. She found herself splitting time between corporate headquarters and various station locations, ensuring that the company's renewed commitment to community service wasn't just a publicity stunt. One morning, as she prepared for another day of balancing her roles, Emma appeared in her bedroom doorway, already dressed for school, but wearing an unusually serious expression. "Mom, can we talk?" Sarah sat on her bed, patting the space beside her. "Of course, sweetheart, what's on your mind?" Emma settled next to her, fiddling with her school bag. "I've been thinking about college applications. I thought we had a few years before that." "We do, but, well, I've changed my mind about what I want to study." Emma took a deep breath. "Instead of medical school like Ashley, I want to focus on business, ethics and community development, like you." Sarah felt her heart swell. "Emma, you don't have to follow my path just because—" "It's not just because of you," Emma interrupted. "Well, not entirely. Watching everything that happened, seeing how one person's choices can affect an entire community. I want to learn how to make those choices count, how to build businesses that help people, not just make money." Sarah pulled her daughter close, remembering her own younger self, struggling to balance dreams with responsibilities. "Whatever you choose to do, I'll support you, but never feel pressured to follow anyone else's path." "I know," Emma smiled. "That's what makes it special. I'm choosing this because I believe in it, just like you chose to help Mr. Walker that day, even though it wasn't the easy thing to do." Later that morning, Sarah arrived at corporate headquarters to find Alex and Edward deep in discussion with a group of regional managers. The company's transformation was evident in the energy of the room. Gone was the sterile corporate atmosphere, replaced by engaged discussions about community impact and ethical business practices. "Sarah," Alex's face lit up as she entered, still making her heart skip even after all they'd been through. Perfect timing. We're discussing the expansion of the community program. Actually, one of the regional managers spoke up, we were hoping you could share some insights. My team is having trouble getting local businesses to partner with us for the workshops. Sarah set down her briefcase, slipping naturally into the role of mentor. The key is to show them it's not just charity, it's about building a stronger community that benefits everyone. Let me share what worked at our first location. As she guided the discussion, Sarah caught Alex watching her with that mixture of pride and love that still made her blush. They had decided on a small wedding, focusing instead on using their resources to expand the community programs. Emma was helping plan a celebration that would include not just family and friends, but the many people whose lives had been touched by their story. The engagement ring caught the morning light as Sarah gestured, explaining a particularly successful partnership with a local technical school. The simple elegance of the ring reflected their shared values: genuine quality over flashy display, meaningful connections over superficial impressions. Edward, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. You know, when I started this company, I had a vision of business as a force for good in the community. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. But watching you all now, he smiled, looking around the room, I see that vision coming back to life, stronger than ever. The meeting continued, but Sarah's mind wandered to the future they were building, a future where business success was measured not just in profits, but in positive impact, where ethical decisions weren't exceptional acts of courage, but the expected way of doing things. The question that had started it all, whether one person's integrity could stand against corporate corruption, had been answered. But new questions were arising. How far could their influence spread? How many lives could they touch? How much positive change could they create? Looking at the engaged faces around her, Sarah knew they would find those answers together. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the Walker family lakehouse's lawn, where chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing the water. It was the perfect setting for a wedding that celebrated not just the union of two people, but the coming together of communities and ideals. Sarah stood at the lake house window, watching as final preparations were made. Instead of traditional wedding decorations, the space was adorned with displays highlighting the various community programs that had grown from their initial workshop. Photos showed smiling faces of people whose lives had been touched, while handwritten notes shared stories of impact and gratitude. Something borrowed, Emma announced, entering the room with a small box. Inside was a delicate bracelet that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother. And something blue, she added, revealing a sapphire pin that Janet Walker had worn at her own wedding. Perfect, Sarah's mother said, helping her daughter with the final touches of her simple but elegant dress. Though I think the something new is more than just your ring. She was right. The new encompassed so much more. New beginnings, new approaches to business, new ways of measuring success. The guest list reflected this transformation. Alongside family and friends were community members, employees from various stations, and even some of the people Sarah had helped during her early days as a cashier. A knock at the door revealed Linda Morrison, who had become a close friend through their shared experiences. The prosecutor's office just called, she said, her eyes bright with emotion. Richardson's cooperation led them to uncover similar schemes at 3 other major corporations. Real change is happening, Sarah. And it started with you. With all of us, Sarah corrected, thinking of how each person's choice to stand up for what was right had created a cascade of positive change. The ceremony itself was a reflection of their values, meaningful rather than showy, focused on community rather than spectacle. Edward Walker officiated, his voice carrying across the lake as he spoke about the power of integrity and love to transform not just individuals, but entire organizations. Some might find it unusual, he said, glancing at the gathered crowd, that a corporate wedding includes customers, employees, and community members. But Sarah and Alex have shown us that business isn't just about transactions. It's about relationships, about recognizing the humanity in every interaction, the opportunity in every challenge. As Sarah and Alex exchanged vows, she caught glimpses of their extended family of allies. Tommy, now heading a company-wide security reform initiative. Diana, who had parlayed her forensic accounting skills into creating transparency protocols that were being adopted by other corporations. Ashley Morrison, who had started a youth mentorship program at her father's newly reformed regional office. The reception was held in and around the lake house, with food provided by local businesses that had partnered with their community programs. Emma and Ashley had organized activities that encouraged guests to share their own stories of community impact, creating a tapestry of positive change that stretched far beyond the original gas station. "Look at this," Alex said softly, leading Sarah to a quiet corner where a wall of photographs and notes had been assembled. "Emma and your mother collected messages from people across all our locations." Sarah read the notes with tears in her eyes. A single mother who had learned to maintain her car through their workshops, now teaching others. An elderly gentleman who had found community through their senior support programs. A teenager who had been inspired to start a neighborhood help network. "It's amazing," she whispered, leaning into Alex's embrace. "All of this from one simple act of kindness. That's the power of doing the right thing," he replied. "It creates ripples that keep spreading." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself on the lake house porch, taking a quiet moment to absorb everything. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted up from the lawn, where guests continued to celebrate and connect. Emma appeared beside her, now tall enough to rest her head on her mother's shoulder. "You know what I realized?" she said thoughtfully. "That first day when you helped Mr. Walker with his gas, you weren't just helping one person. You were showing everyone what's possible when you lead with kindness." Sarah hugged her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. "And now you'll take that lesson and create your own ripples of change." "We all will," Alex added, joining them. "Every day, in every interaction, we have the chance to choose integrity over expedience, community over profit." The lake reflected the setting sun, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a gas station counter to corporate boardrooms, from simple acts of kindness to systematic change. The company's transformation had become a case study in ethical business practices, but the real story wasn't in the corporate policies or profit margins. It was in the countless individual moments of choice, the daily decisions to prioritize people over procedures, community over convenience. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah, Alex, and Emma stood together on the porch watching. The ripples spread across the lake. Each small wave represented the impact of their choices, touching distant shores they might never see. The question wasn't just about what they had accomplished, but about what was still possible. How many more lives could be transformed? How many more ripples could they create? The answer, Sarah knew, would unfold one choice, one act of kindness, one day at a time. 6 months after the wedding, the original Walker's gas station had become unrecognizable. The once simple convenience store now featured a community meeting space, a training center, and a small cafe where local residents gathered to share stories and support each other. It stood as a model for what every location in the chain was becoming, not just a place of business, but a hub of community connection. Sarah sat in what had once been her manager's office, now transformed into a warm, welcoming space where she held regular mentoring sessions. Today she was meeting with a group of new station managers, teaching them the philosophy that had transformed the company. "The numbers are important," she explained, gesturing to the performance charts on the wall, "but they're not the whole story. Every interaction is an opportunity to make someone's life a little better." Among the managers was a familiar face, Mike Stevens' replacement, a young woman named Rachel who reminded Sarah of herself 3 years ago. Rachel had started as a cashier at another location and had worked her way up, showing the same instinct for caring about customers that had once caught Alex's attention. "But how do we balance that with business requirements?" Rachel asked, her notepad filled with careful observations. "I want to help people, but I also need to meet corporate expectations." Sarah smiled, remembering her own similar concerns. The beautiful thing is, they're not separate goals. When you truly serve your community, business success follows naturally. Let me show you something. She led the group to the training center, where Tommy was conducting another maintenance workshop. The room was full, but not just with people learning about car care. Local mechanics had volunteered to share their expertise, creating connections that benefited their own businesses while helping others. See how it works? Sarah gestured to the scene. The mechanics get new customers who trust them because they met them here. People save money by learning basic maintenance, and our station becomes known as a place that genuinely cares about the community. Everyone wins. As if to prove her point, the elderly woman who had mastered the tire gauge months ago was now helping a young mother learn the same skill. These small interactions, multiplied across hundreds of locations, were changing the very nature of what a gas station could be. Later that afternoon, Sarah joined Alex in the corporate headquarters for a different kind of meeting. The boardroom was filled with executives from other companies, all eager to learn about the Walker model of ethical business practices. "The transformation of your company is remarkable," one CEO commented, studying the presentation on sustainable community engagement. "But surely it's affected your profit margins." "Actually," Alex replied, pulling up the financial reports, "our revenues have increased by 30%. It turns out that when you build genuine trust with your community, they become more than customers. They become partners in your success." Sarah watched her husband with pride as he walked the executives through their journey. Alex had changed too, moving away from the traditional corporate leader model to become something new. A businessman who measured wealth not just in dollars, but in positive impact. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent call from Emma's school. But unlike the last time, this wasn't about bullying or threats. Emma's business ethics project, inspired by the Walker's transformation, had been selected for a national competition. "Mom, Dad?" Emma burst into the boardroom, forgetting corporate protocol in her excitement. "Sorry to interrupt, but I had to tell you in person. The judges said our project could revolutionize how business schools teach ethics." The executives watched with interest as Sarah and Alex embraced their daughter, the genuine family moment contrasting with the formal business setting. It was another example of how the Walkers had broken down the artificial barriers between business and human connection. "Perhaps," one of the visiting CEOs mused, "your daughter could present her project at our next industry conference." The future of business leadership should hear from the next generation. As Emma excitedly discussed possibilities with the executives, Sarah felt Alex's hand slip into hers. They shared a look that held volumes: pride in their daughter, joy in their shared mission, and excitement for the future they were building. The day ended with a family dinner at the original gas station's cafe, now a popular community gathering spot. Edward joined them, watching with satisfaction as locals came and went, each greeting the Walkers like family. "You know," he said, watching Emma explain her project to a group of interested customers, "when I started this company, I dreamed of it becoming something like this, but it took your fresh perspective to show us how." Sarah looked around at what they had built, not just a successful business, but a model for how commerce and compassion could coexist. The gas station was still a gas station, but it had become something more, a place where community wasn't just a buzzword, but a living reality. The question that had once seemed impossible, how to balance business success with genuine social impact, had been answered. But new questions were arising. How could they help other companies make the same transformation? How could they ensure this philosophy would outlast them? And most importantly, how could they prepare the next generation to carry this vision forward?